In late July 2010, Lorenzen Wright's phone unexpectedly came back to life. On the other end of the line was a person well known to the family and friends of the former NBA player. The conversation lasted only a short time and did not seem out of the ordinary. Back then, no one could even imagine that these would be the last moments Lorenzen would ever reach out. A very short time passed and his phone went silent. He stopped answering calls, did not appear at home, and seemed to vanish without a trace. For a man who had always stayed in touch with his loved ones, such behavior was completely out of character. At first, those around him hoped it was just a misunderstanding. Perhaps he had decided to take a short trip, turned off his phone, or simply wanted to be alone. But with each passing hour, the anxiety only grew. Then came the event that turned the disappearance of the famous basketball player into one of the most mysterious stories in the world of sports. Investigators obtained a recording of the final phone call. It captured several loud bangs, followed by complete silence. This short recording instantly changed the direction of the investigation. It became clear that this was no longer just a case of an accidental disappearance. However, the most surprising part was yet to come. Despite this recording, the search dragged on, and answers became fewer and fewer. Days passed, new theories emerged, each more incredible than the last, but every single one ultimately hit a dead end. Many were convinced that the cause of the incident was a routine robbery for money. After all, former professional athletes often become easy targets for criminals. Yet the deeper investigators delved into the circumstances of Lorenzen Wright's disappearance, the more obvious it became that this theory did not explain what was happening. Some details looked so strange that it felt as though someone was very carefully trying to conceal the true picture of events. And when the truth finally began to emerge years later, it turned out to be far more frightening than almost anyone could have imagined. To understand why a successful NBA player ended up at the center of this tragic story, and how a chain of events led to that July night, one needs to go back many years to where it all began. Lorenzen Wright was born on November 4, 1975 in Memphis, Tennessee. This city always lived and breathed basketball, but at the same time remained a place where far from every child managed to escape difficult life circumstances. For many teenagers, the street became their main teacher, and the opportunity to build a successful future seemed almost out of reach. However, Lorenzen chose a completely different path from an early age. He grew up in a large family where his parents tried to give their children everything possible despite limited means. His father, Herb Wright, had once played professional basketball himself and understood perfectly how fierce the competition could be. He was the first to notice that his son possessed not only outstanding physical attributes, but also a rare character. Great height, long arms, and natural coordination set Lorenzen apart from his peers. But his father constantly repeated one simple thought to him: talent alone is never enough. Practically every day turned into a training session. After school, Lorenzen spent hours working on his shot, footwork, and play under the basket. While many of his friends spent their free time on the streets, he returned to the basketball court over and over again. Gradually, it became clear that basketball was not just a favorite game for him. It was a chance to change his own life and help his family. Already during his school years, people far beyond Memphis began talking about the tall and unusually agile center. His confident play under the glass, ability to fight for rebounds, and capacity to perform equally effectively in both defense and offense attracted the attention of coaches from all over the country. Match after match, his name became increasingly well known, and offers from universities continued to pour in, one after another. Despite his growing popularity, Lorenzen remained a calm and man of few words. Those who knew him well recalled that he rarely sought to be the center of attention. Instead of loud statements, he preferred to prove everything through his play. It was precisely this trait that later helped him earn the respect of his teammates and coaches. But in his youth, it already set him apart from many talented players. When the time came to choose his next step, the doors of several prestigious basketball programs opened for Lorenzen. He understood that a completely different level was now beginning, where natural gifts alone were no longer enough. Ahead of him lay years that were supposed to show whether the boy from Memphis was truly capable of transforming into a player in the National Basketball Association. His choice fell on the University of Memphis, which in those years competed under the name Memphis State University. For Lorenzen, this was not just a sports decision. He stayed close to his family, close to the city he always considered his home, and got the opportunity to develop under the watchful eye of local fans. Expectations were enormous, but from the very first games, it became clear that they were not exaggerated. At the collegiate level, Wright quickly turned into one of the most prominent big men in the country. He played confidently under the basket, collected rebounds, blocked shots, and was not afraid of physical battles with more experienced opponents. At the same time, his game was not built exclusively on physical attributes. He chose his position wisely, read plays well, and understood when to play aggressively and when it was better to pass to a teammate. It was precisely this combination of strength and basketball IQ that increasingly attracted the attention of NBA scouts. After a successful season, Lorenzen decided to enter the draft. In 1996, he was selected 7th overall by the Los Angeles Clippers. This was a high draft pick that spoke for itself. The team's management expected to get a player capable of becoming an important part of the franchise for years to come. The transition to the NBA proved to be a serious test. Now, the best basketball players in the world were playing against him, and experienced opponents capitalized on every mistake instantly. But Lorenzen did not try to impress with flashy moves. He gradually adapted to the new speed of the game, worked on himself, and earned the trust of his coaches through hard work and dedication. Soon enough, it became clear that they had a reliable center ready to do any dirty work for the team. Over his career, he managed to play for several clubs in the league. After the Clippers came the Atlanta Hawks, Memphis Grizzlies, Sacramento Kings, and Cleveland Cavaliers. Wherever he played, his teammates noted the exact same trait. Lorenzen did not strive to become the main star of the locker room and did not seek loud headlines in the press. He simply stepped onto the court, did his job, and helped the team wherever it was necessary. In time, serious financial success followed. Contracts in the world's strongest league allowed him to earn millions of dollars. He bought a large house, could provide for his loved ones, and no longer had to think about the hardships he faced in childhood. From the outside, his life looked like the embodiment of the American dream. A boy from a poor neighborhood managed to break into the NBA, earned a fortune, started a family, and enjoyed respect in the basketball world. Yet, right at the moment when it seemed all the hardest trials were behind him, events began to unfold in his personal life that most fans knew nothing about. Behind the smiles in public and a stable career, problems steadily accumulated that were capable of changing his destiny in the most tragic way. From the outside, it seemed that Lorenzen Wright was living the exact life thousands of young athletes dream of. Behind him was a long career in the NBA, financial stability, and the respect of his colleagues. But outside the basketball court, things were far from prosperous. The most important person in his life for a long time was his wife, Shara Wright. Together, they raised children, built a family life, and went through both joyful and difficult moments. One of the most painful trials was a tragedy impossible to forget. In 2003, one of their sons, little Lamar, passed away before reaching 3 years of age due to a severe illness. This loss was a massive blow to the entire family. Loved ones later recalled that Lorenzen changed significantly after the incident. He still smiled at those around him, but inside, he was experiencing something he preferred to keep almost entirely to himself. At the same time, relationships within the family gradually grew more complicated. Constant moves, the demanding schedule of a professional athlete, financial questions, and accumulated disagreements pushed the spouses further and further apart. Over time, conflicts occurred more frequently, and attempts to preserve their previous relationship no longer brought results. Toward the end of his career, other problems piled up. His income was no longer what it had been during his best years in the NBA, yet his level of expenses remained practically unchanged. Lorenzen continued to help relatives, supported loved ones, and bore the responsibility for a large family. Like many former professional athletes, he gradually encountered the reality that massive earnings do not guarantee financial peace of mind after retirement. In the end, the couple decided to separate. The divorce proved difficult and was accompanied by disputes, including those related to money and property. Despite this, Lorenzen tried to stay close to his children and maintain warm relationships with them. For him, they were always the main meaning of life, and it was precisely for their sake that he tried to resolve the accumulated problems. It might have seemed from the outside that this was merely a difficult life stage that many families go through, but in reality, a chain of circumstances was already gradually forming around the former basketball player that would later take on an entirely different meaning. Some decisions made during that period, certain acquaintances and specific conflicts would, over time, turn out to be crucial details of one massive tragedy. In the summer of 2010, Lorenzen was no longer playing in the NBA, but he continued to make plans for the future. No suspects imagined that weeks remained before his name would once again be on the front pages of American newspapers. Only the reason would have nothing to do with sports. The summer of 2010 began quite ordinarily for Lorenzen Wright. After finishing his professional career, he lived in Memphis, spent a lot of time with his children, and tried to gradually sort out his life. It might have seemed that the hardest trials were already behind him, but precisely during those weeks, events began to unfold around him that investigators would later reconstruct literally minute by minute. In July, Lorenzen kept in touch with relatives, friends, and former teammates. He discussed personal plans, resolved household matters, and did not give the impression of a man about to vanish anywhere. On the contrary, all his actions suggested he was making plans for the immediate future. That is precisely why the subsequent turn of events looked so strange. In the final days before his disappearance, he changed his plans several times and met with various people. Later, the investigation would establish that during this period, he found himself surrounded by people he trusted. At the time, no one attached any special significance to this, as such meetings were a regular part of his life. Yet it was precisely these meetings that would later become the subject of the closest scrutiny. Meanwhile, certain circumstances looked increasingly unusual. Individual participants in those events would later give contradictory explanations, and their accounts would noticeably differ from one another. Investigators did not yet know exactly what had happened, but they already understood that someone was hiding a significant part of the truth. Special attention was drawn to the final hours preceding the disappearance. Lorenzen did not warn his loved ones that he was planning to leave for long. He left no messages, did not say where he intended to spend the night, and did not take belongings with him that a person usually needs if they plan to be away for several days. For those who knew him well, such behavior looked entirely uncharacteristic. Later, it would become known that on that evening, he went to a meeting from which he never returned. Back then, no one yet realized how important every minute, every phone call, and every movement of his car would turn out to be. From that exact moment, the ordinary life of the former NBA player ended, and a story began that would turn into one of the highest-profile criminal mysteries in American sports for years to come. When Lorenzen failed to return home and stopped answering calls, his loved ones felt almost immediately that something serious had happened. This was completely unlike him. He could change plans or run late, but he never vanished without a trace or left his family in total ignorance. With each passing hour, the anxiety intensified, and soon the family turned to the police. The search began. Investigators interviewed relatives, friends, neighbors, and anyone who might have seen the former basketball player in his final days. Possible routes were checked, phone connections were studied, and the events of the last hours of his life were reconstructed. But the more information they managed to gather, the less clear the overall picture became. Special attention was immediately drawn to the final phone call. It was during this conversation that the emergency dispatcher received a short connection that subsequently became one of the most famous pieces of evidence in the case. The recording captured Lorenzen's voice, followed by several loud bangs. After that, the connection abruptly cut off. This short audio snippet left virtually no doubt that an emergency event had occurred, but determining the exact location of the call right away proved impossible. Despite such an alarming piece of evidence, the investigation encountered serious difficulties. Mobile phone location tracking technologies at that time were much less accurate than they are today. The search zone remained too large, and time continued to work against the investigation. Every lost day reduced the chances of quickly establishing what had happened that night. Meanwhile, a wide variety of theories began to spread around the city. Some assumed the former athlete might have become the victim of a random mugging. Others spoke of a possible conflict related to money. Completely unbelievable rumors also surfaced, but none of them were confirmed by facts. The family continued waiting for any news at all, hoping Lorenzen would be found alive. More than a week passed. The search did not stop, but there were still no results. It seemed the person had simply vanished, leaving no traces behind. And it was precisely then that the investigation made its harshest turn. In a wooded area of Shelby County, a discovery was made that permanently changed the status of this case and showed that a far more complex investigation awaited investigators than anyone could have imagined in the first days of the disappearance. Lorenzen Wright's body was discovered on July 28, 2010, in an overgrown wooded area near Hickory Hill, a Memphis neighborhood he knew well. It had been lying there for over a week. The news instantly swept across the country. For basketball fans, this came as a true shock. Just recently, they had hoped the former NBA player was simply missing, out of touch, but now it became obvious that a tragedy had occurred. The investigative team immediately began inspecting the scene. Experts carefully studied every detail, trying to understand exactly what happened on that July night. Ballistics confirmed that several shots had been fired at Lorenzen. However, almost no traces remained around that could quickly lead to the culprits. There were no eyewitnesses, no security cameras, and no clear picture of what transpired. For the police, this meant one thing: the crime had been committed in a way designed to make the investigation as difficult as possible. Investigators had to reconstruct the final hours of the former athlete's life, literally piece by piece. They analyzed phone connections, checked car movements, studied Wright's circle of acquaintances, and tried to find the slightest clue that would reveal the motive. Yet it was the motive that raised the most questions. Lorenzen had retired from the sport long ago and was not a person who regularly ended up in police reports. He had no known conflicts that could explain what happened. The random attack theory looked less and less convincing. Personal belongings had not vanished in the way typical of robberies, and the circumstances pointed to the perpetrator's actions having been carefully planned in advance. The investigation began considering a wide variety of theories. Business contacts, financial transactions, relationships with relatives, friends, and acquaintances were checked. Dozens of people were interrogated, but almost every new conversation only added more questions. Some witnesses contradicted themselves, while others reported details that could not be confirmed. It felt as though the investigation constantly ran into an invisible wall. Months passed. The high-profile case stayed out of the headlines, but there was almost no real progress. Gradually, it became increasingly likely that the perpetrators had managed to cover their tracks perfectly and might never face justice. However, years later, a single, seemingly insignificant piece of evidence would quietly wait its turn and ultimately completely changed the course of the investigation. The investigation was gradually hitting a dead end. Despite enormous public resonance, the experience of the investigators, and media attention, the case barely moved forward. The police had the results of expert analyses, phone records, and numerous witness testimonies, but none of these details formed a cohesive picture. Year after year, investigators continued to check old theories. They re-interviewed people who had spoken with Lorenzen shortly before his disappearance, rechecked documents, and compared statements given at different times. It was then that certain contradictions became noticeable. Some witnesses changed their stories, while others claimed they barely remembered the events of that night. Such discrepancies were not direct proof of anyone's guilt, but they forced the investigation to return once again to episodes that had seemingly already been examined. Lorenzen's family did not stop demanding answers. Relatives openly stated they did not believe the incident was accidental and were convinced someone knew far more than they were willing to tell. Months passed, then years, but the feeling of incompleteness never faded. Every time it seemed the investigation had completely stalled, a new hope emerged, which soon led to disappointment once again. Meanwhile, the development of forensic science and analytical methods gradually opened up new possibilities for the investigation. Details that previously seemed insignificant began to be studied anew. Investigators decided to re-examine physical evidence and reconstruct the full chain of events without missing even the smallest details. This exact approach frequently allows crimes to be solved many years later. A real breakthrough came unexpectedly. During a re-examination, investigators managed to track down an item directly connected to the events of that July night. This discovery allowed a fresh look at already known facts and connected details that had seemed disjointed for many years. After that, for the first time in a long time, the investigation began moving forward rapidly. The deeper investigators plunged into the new materials, the clearer it became. The crime had been carefully planned, and the key to solving it had been much closer all along than anyone could have guessed. It remained only to establish precisely who stood behind this plan. And when the name of the main suspect was finally voiced, it came as a true shock to the entire country. After years of fruitless searching, the investigation unexpectedly got a second wind. Investigators again began carefully studying all the case materials, utilizing methods that simply did not exist in the early years. It was then that one of the old pieces of evidence acquired a completely new meaning. During a re-examination, the location of the weapon believed to have been used on that July night was established. It was not found by accident. Information came from a person who decided to cooperate with the investigation. Ballistic testing showed that this exact pistol matched the marks recorded by experts back in 2010. For the first time in many years, the investigation received concrete physical evidence rather than a mere assumption. At the same time, investigators reanalyzed phone connections, financial documents, and the testimonies of people who were close to Lorenzen shortly before his disappearance. If previously this information existed separately from one another, now it began to fall into a single picture. More and more details pointed not to a random attack, but to a prearranged plan. Special attention was drawn to contradictions in the testimonies of certain participants in the events. Some changed their stories, others could not explain certain circumstances, and some facts did not match established data at all. Every new check only intensified the investigators' suspicions. Gradually, the circle of potential participants began to narrow. Now the investigation focused not on searching for an unknown criminal, but on people belonging to the inner circle of the former NBA player. This exact aspect felt most unexpected. The more evidence appeared, the harder it was to believe the solution had been right nearby all along. In December 2017, a high-profile arrest followed. Charges were brought against Lorenzen's ex-wife, Shara Wright. According to the investigation, she organized the crime, while Billy Ray Turner, whom the family had known for years, acted as the direct perpetrator. This news came as a true shock. The person Lorenzen had once trusted most, and with whom he raised children, turned out to be at the center of the investigation. Yet the hardest question remained unanswered. What could have driven his ex-wife to take such a step? The search for the motive was supposed to reveal the full picture of what happened and explain why this story ended so tragically.
The investigation concluded that the cause of the incident was money and personal disputes that accumulated after the divorce. According to the prosecution, Shara Wright feared losing a significant portion of her financial assets and decided to organize the crime, drawing Billy Ray Turner into it. In 2019, Shara confessed to her role in organizing the event and struck a deal with the prosecution, receiving a lengthy prison sentence. Later, the court also found Turner guilty, identifying him as the direct shooter. For American sports, this became one of the most shocking trials of the 21st century. Fans found it hard to believe that a man who survived a difficult childhood, achieved success in the NBA, and earned millions fell victim not to random circumstances, but to a carefully prepared plan centered around people from his closest circle. Even after the verdicts were handed down, certain questions remained without final answers. Discussions persisted over whether other people could have participated in this story and whether all details of the event became public knowledge. However, the main investigation was completed, and the culprits faced punishment. For Lorenzen's children, this provided at least a partial closure to their multi-year wait. The basketball world also did not forget its former player. Teammates and friends remembered him as a calm, kind-hearted person, always ready to help out. That is exactly how he remained in the memory of those who knew him personally, rather than through newspaper headlines. Today, Lorenzen Wright's name is recalled not only because of his NBA career, but also as a reminder that large contracts and fame cannot protect a person from personal tragedies. Over 13 seasons in the world's strongest basketball league, he scored more than 8,000 points, grabbed over 6,000 rebounds, and earned a reputation as one of the most reliable centers of his generation. But his main legacy turned out to be not statistical numbers, but a story that forced many to rethink the price of trust. A lesser-known fact is that the Lorenzen Wright Foundation was established in Memphis to help children engage in sports and receive support. Thus, his name continues to benefit people, and the memory of him lives on not only in NBA archives, but also in the lives of new generations.